Hello everyone and welcome back to the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Today we're going to be having a look at how we can create an iridescent texture using Arnold and Maya. And iridescence is basically a natural phenomenon which happens, and it makes objects sort of appear to be a different colour depending on which angle you look at them from. You will notice this in certain car paints or the feathers of certain animals. So here's a couple of renders from the project that we're going to be setting up today. So we're going to be doing sort of a bubble texture. So first of all, let's jump into Maya, and I'm just going to create a really simple scene of just these spheres, which are going to be our bubbles. I'll smooth them out using the smooth mesh preview, and I'm just going to duplicate them and just make them different sizes. It doesn't really matter how you set this up, just as long as you have some spheres that we can apply the texture to. We're going to be doing the majority of the work in hypershade, so this bit's kind of irrelevant. Just as long as you have some spheres, everything will be fine. So go up to the Arnold tab, go to Lights and create a new sky dome light, and this is where we're going to add our HDRI in. So in the Colour tab, we're just going to put our HDRI, and I'm just using a free one I've downloaded off the internet, and it's just of a garden scene. So once that's loaded, you want to copy the image name, so the file path for the image name, and we're just doing this because we're going to paste this into the environment tab in the render settings. So if we open the render settings and go to the Arnold renderer tab and go to environment, and under background you want to create a new sky shader, and in the color we're just going to put the same file, so just copy and paste it under a file node. We're just going to do this because with the HDRI setup in the sky dome alone, that doesn't create anything for our material to refract, and obviously our bubbles are going to be transparent, so we need something for it to refract through. So just setting this up now. So what we need to do is untick every one of these boxes except for primary visibility and visible in refractions. They're the only ones we need in the AI sky. The sky dome will take care of the rest. So let's render now, and we will see that we can see our background and we've got some very bright spheres. So I've worked with this HDRI before, and I know that a value of 0.1 works pretty well. So I'm going to just test this out, and you can see we've got a nice sort of even looking render. It looked pretty noisy at the moment, but that's just because the samples were down on the sky dome light. But moving on, we can fix that later. We've just applied a AI standard material to one of the spheres, and we're just going to jump into hypershade because this is where the majority of work is going to be done for this project. So I've just middle mouse dropped the AI standard material into the work area, and I'm just going to apply the same material to the other two spheres. So there we go. And the first thing we're going to do is go to the Utilities tab, and we're going to drop in a sampler info node. And this sampler info node has got many uses, but today we're just going to be using one output from it, which is facing ratio, which basically means you can shade things depending on how much the normal of that object is facing the camera. And once that's dropped in, we just need to make a little bit of space between them both. And the next one we're going to drop in is just a 2D texture, which is just a ramp. So once that's dropped in, we can actually get rid of the node that comes with it, which is the place 2D texture node. So just unplugging that, we can just delete it. And the reason that we've dropped in this ramp node is because the facing ratio outputted by the sampler info node is going to shade the spectrum of that ramp depending on how much things are facing the camera. So because the ramp is vertical by standard, we want to plug the facing ratio outputted by the sampler info into the V coordinates of that ramp. So once we've done this, we can duplicate the ramp, and we need to do this same setup again. So we need to expand the UV coordinates and plug the facing ratio into the V coordinates of the second ramp. But once we've done that, we need to delete one of the colours from the ramp on this second one and just choose any colour. So I've just chosen red because it was the easiest to access. And the next node we need to put in is a utility node, and it's a remap HSV node. And this node just basically allows us to remap hue values and saturation values, and we can actually input textures to control these. So the idea is we're using our black to white gradient or ramp to scroll through the hues. So basically we'll get a full spectrum of hues by doing this. So what we need to do is put the out color of the ramp 2 into the color of the remap HSV, and we'll just plug that into the color of the AI standard. So if we open this HSV node and look at the hue selected value, we can middle mouse drop our ramp 1 onto the selected value, of this. So I'm just going to do a quick live render with using the IPR, and you'll see what's happening. Anything closest to the camera is our red colour. The black to white ramp that we just created is basically telling that shader to go through every eventuality of its hue. So it's going to start red and it's going to go through every colour until it's back at red again on the complete other side. I hope that's not too confusing. I know it's quite complicated to get your head around. So the next thing we need to do is to make this look a little bit more organic, so we need to add a little bit of randomness into the hues. So going into our ramp shaders, we need to go to the noise field. What we're going to do is put in the noise tab 0.3 and 0.4 in the noise frequency, so do that for both of the ramps. And this is just going to create a little bit of randomness and make things look a little bit more organic. So you can see there in the live render view, it's created this little bit of randomness that you would expect to see on a bubble. So I connected this shader to the colour field of the Arnold material, just so we could see what we're doing easier. Let's just maximise our hypershade and look at our network. So what we need to do is unplug our remap HSV from the AI standard material, and we're just going to middle mouse drop it onto the colour of the specular, and we're going to do the same thing for the colour of the reflection. And once we've done this, we can actually close down our hypershade or just minimize, and as you'll probably notice, our render now looks a little bit weird. So what I'm going to do in the diffuse tab, just change the colour to white, and we're just going to put a really small value in the weight here, just so it's only got a tiny bit of colour. So I used 0.02 because I found that's a good value that works when I set this up before. So down in the specular, we're going to want to turn this up a little bit, but not too much. So I found a value of 0.05, brings in that nice specular highlight, and we're going to want to turn the roughness down and tick the Fresnel box to get a more natural, physically realistic sort of specular highlight. So now going down to the reflection options, I'm going to put a value of 0.15, and that just brings in a few more reflections, and I'm just going to want to tick the Fresnel box, which gives us a physically realistic look. And in the refraction, we're going to want to put this to 0.75 to make it almost transparent. And again, we're going to want to tick the Fresnel box, and there we have it. That basically is all there is. We can turn the weight of the specular up a little bit if we want to bring in more of those highlights. It's up to you. And also in the reflection tab you can crank this, but I found the values that I've inputted before work quite well as a sort of happy medium. So what if we wanted to change the colour of this iridescence? Well, that's actually really easy. We can go into our black to white ramp and start to adjust the where the black position is. So if we move this up a little bit, you'll see the colours start to scroll through all the hues. So I like to sort of find one that's kind of purpley looking. You can scroll the white one as well and find something you're happy with. I think these sort of purpley highlights start to look quite realistic and nice, and that's basically it. So I hope that made sense to you. Thank you once again for watching, and please stay tuned for more YellowDog 3D tips. Cheers.